Fantastic. Hi. You know, it's so
Hi.
funny. We had a little technical glitch, and then you said I was Emmy award winning, which is amazing, but
Emmy
not true.
Award nominated. That was my
Yeah, but
bad.
I know it's not bad. I appreciate it. Inshallah, my mom and dad are
Inshallah.
watching it, and they're like, my son won an Emmy. Uh, okay.
Thanks
I'm
for
very happy.
correcting me.
La بالعكس, I'm very happy to be with you.
Um, I feel like a lot of us in our adult life
Mhm.
get to meet our inner child way later and understand that he or she has not been nurtured in the right way, hence our behavior or certain things that we do today is
Mhm.
only because we were not able to be given that as a child
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
attended to in that way as a child. Do you
You
feel
know,
that you had these
yeah.
moments?
Yeah. I think I confuse love with attention. That's a realization that I've come to. That's been a consistent kind of pattern of dysfunction in my life, which has caused me a lot of pain and suffering as an adult. But then also, as you're saying, it's tied to my childhood and to the kind of dynamics and my perception of where I was receiving unconditional love, and where, whether you receive it or not, it might not be communicated in a consistent way that you need to feel secure. So yeah, I think to build off what you're saying, the way I started to understand the question more is through my personal experience. I realized a lot of the personal decisions I was making as a teenager and in my 20s were based on validation, were based on a kind of something that had been lacking in my childhood that I was trying to overcompensate for, in one way or another. I think there's different things that can motivate us, and that's okay. It doesn't always have to be something noble. But
Mm.
the point is that when I got to a certain age, I realized that I was very much trapped in a pattern of living for other people because I wanted to feel deep sense of validation. And I think that has a lot to do with conditioning as a kid,
Yeah.
or since we're children. But
Mm.
yeah, I think when I dance, whether it's intentional or not, um, that's when I often am reminded very viscerally of the kind of pure joy and wonder that children feel, not just when they're dancing, but when they're having all kinds of interactions.
How did these realizations about the lack of when you were a child, these realizations, how were they able to help you as an adult? Like, how were you able to shape yourself better due to these realization that when I was a child I did not get 1 2 3, or I was not attentive to 1 2 3? You reached your
Yeah.
realization, and how did that help? Did you change your
Um,
patterns?
Patterns are very hard to break. I think the more important question and maybe answer, more interesting answer, is did I start to try, genuinely try? And that trying only came after I was aware, which quite honestly, at the age of 35, was only very recently. It was about the last 4 or 5 years I started to have these realizations. And yeah, there have been major shifts in my life. I don't know. It's all of a sudden like, how personal should I get
Real
with
personal, Ahmed.
with this very accessible and relatable person on the other end of this virtual
Okay.
connection? I real personal. I think I think things started to shift for me most profoundly when I went through repeated patterns of abusive relationships, unknowingly that I was continuing to enter into them. And it's not necessarily with bad people; it's just a dynamic and a pattern. Mostly in my personal life, but also in my professional life. And mostly, it wasn't until I started to notice a pattern of numbing feelings that using substances, but much more importantly, using escapism in general, because there's many ways to escape, whether it's food or becoming a workaholic or whatever it might be. Yeah, and I think those realizations, the shift started for me when went through a really traumatic experience 4 or 5 years ago in my personal life. And I don't think it's something I need to share in this forum, because it's not because it's like scandalous or I'm ashamed, but it's like I've also recently realized that there are some things that are actually healthier to keep private. That said, it was abusive in both a verbal and a physical way, and it was a traumatic incident that made me all of a sudden take stock and maybe confront, I don't want to say truths, but I would say loops, patterns that were really holding me back, and more importantly, making me suffer emotionally and physically.
That's amazing. And realizing your pattern, I think that is the most important part in life in general.
100%.
It's why what we need to work towards, I believe, is realizing if we have patterns that's sinking us without us knowing.
Albert Einstein said famously something about, if you do the same thing over and over and expect a different result, you're crazy, or you're whatever. My mom has a much better version in Arabic, but the point is, it's a
what is your mom's
that,
version?
لا but that one I'll tell you later, because it has a lot of very expressive language. Yeah, let's just say it's very very theatrical. لا بس wow, this is rare for me to not just instinctively share everything, which is making me realize that in addition to your question, I should probably explain, just so that I'm not vague. That incident I was talking about was years ago, and then there was a process of 3 to 4 years where I started to see the patterns of my suffering and realize, even though I had taken small steps, when we all go through a hard time, or when we all confront our ego, it's a natural, and I don't know if everyone knows exactly what an ego is, but when you do confront the thing that is our ego, because it is a thing, right? You see yourself and you start to see things differently, and then you really very quickly after that become faced with a choice of, are you going to let it control you? Because you'll be aware, as you said, of how it was controlling you. And so consciously I started to make a choice of being aware of it, and then a lot of changes happened in my life. My friendships changed. I quit my job a little bit too late, but better late than never. And I just took some time to really explore and indulge those things that as a kid made me feel not just alive, but truly connected to myself. Yes, connected to myself and to everybody around me, which is not everybody, everything, cats, dogs, birds, bees. And I think it's, part of the reason I was so happy to talk to you today, just on a side note, is that this whole quarantine thing has done one thing for me, which is it's made me painfully aware of my privilege. And in a way, the way that we became connected is through a privilege. And point is, it's always good to honor the things that you're aware of and realize, because then I think that's when you find, as you said before we went live, that's when you find a flow. And when you flow, then everyone starts to flow with you. And so maybe we're flowing here.
Yeah, we are. You mentioned that a lot of things changed, including your friends.
Yeah.
And many other things, obviously, which are important. But I think a lot of times what stops people from changing the pattern, although sometimes they come in realization of it, but go into a stage of ignoring it and in doubt, because there's a lot of things to do to change the pattern and succeed. Many find it hard about this certain topic. Your friends. You've been friends for many years, and suddenly you realize the flow is not there, or the connection is not there, whatever it is.
And sometimes it's not suddenly, right? It's just, sometimes
a sudden realization.
Yeah, I guess it's true what you're saying, but for me, it's important, I think, to mention that if I'm honest with myself with a little bit of distance now, I look back and it's like I was aware. I've been doing meditation recently, and someone said something very simple but interesting to me, which is there's a difference between knowing and knowledge. And that's semantics. But like for me, I have a lot of knowledge, but I don't know things. I know that seems like, well, what does he mean? He's just like slowing down saying the same root word. But I think it's just to highlight that, these realizations often come sooner than we're ready for. And so that's why it's important to be aware.
Yeah, but how did you manage to change your flow with your friends? What strength did you find? What motivated you to continue tearing down that pattern?
I think, in my experience, the people that are around me often are a reflection of where I am within myself. Because I'm also a person who is so socially active, in the sense that I'm kind of a social animal. I love to socialize. I love to listen, but it's a big part of my profession, but also in my personal life. It's just like an attribute I have. Maybe that's why I'm in the business of storytelling. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, you want people around you who challenge you and who bring out not just the best. We often say the best in you, but I think more important than the best is the truth, a more authentic version of yourself. And, in life, especially in your 20s and 30s, as you're trying to establish yourself and you're trying to assert yourself and have autonomy and independence, you can get attached to various things, and those identities can then actually, which are often based on friends, groups of friends and the people who are around you, they can start to limit you, and kind of dim not just your light in the cheesy way, but kind of dim the thing about you that has maybe been neglected by you because of fear of this or that, or this, your family or your community, or you associated it with another aspect
fear
of
of
your
acceptance,
identity.
maybe.
Yeah, like the different aspects of our identity that make us fear not just being accepted, but forget even being loved, but being even just appreciated and acknowledged, or even acknowledged. I mean, there's different steps. And anyway, so I found myself with spending time increasingly as I got older with less and less people. And when I really went through a really rough time in my life about a year ago, I was really telling the people who were there for me when I was incapable of being there for myself. And more than being incapable of being there for myself, it's like the people who really, when I look back at how in the entirety of the friendship, or even more specifically, in my weak moments when I was annoying and I was like miserable to be around, and I was like very self-absorbed, because when you're sad, when you're in misery, like you just want pity. And especially if I'm a man, when you have a sick man, it's like very different than a sick woman. He said sexistly, but the point is,
Do you truly believe that?
I believe, I believe that. What do you mean that?
A sick man and a sick woman.
I think that men are, I think that women have a higher threshold for pain. And I think that men, for a lot of reasons, when they're sick, as a man, tend to worry about themselves more than women do, for sure. That's purely anecdotal, but very
Do you think
accurate.
that it's because they're not used to being vulnerable?
I think because inherently and traditionally, men are not used to being vulnerable, are not allowed to be vulnerable. But more importantly, or as importantly, it's that women traditionally are actually expected to be caretakers and have that burden of taking care of children and taking care of the shelter. And so I think they're more accustomed to taking care of themselves and just getting on with it. I like that tangent. But back to your earlier point, what was the original? Sorry, I took you off track.
It's okay. This whole combo is gonna get off track, the rails and
Oh,
everything.
yeah,
All
that
good.
we.
Ahmed, do you live your truth? Your full, authentic truth?
If you ask me, truth is, I would say no. If you ask my closest friends who know me really well, they'll say no. If you ask my closest friends who know me really well, and let's just say, let's just say there's a lot of people who tell me that the reason they respect and admire me or care about me at all is because they do feel that I live my truth. And this is just
Why do
another
you feel you
reminder.
don't though?
Well, I think it's another reminder that perception dictates reality. I think it's a more honest statement if I were to say that I every day I try to live my truth. And recently I've been trying to do it a little bit more, and it ebbs and flows. But do I live it all the time? No. If I did, oh, wow, I don't know. Maybe soon. I'll let you know. I'll be sure to get back in touch. But I try to, because it
What's
feels
stopping?
it
What's
feels
stopping you?
What's stopping me? Fear. A little bit of fear. Less fear about what other people will say, and more. There's something that you're making me think of that we don't often talk about enough, which is fear of success,
I
fear of happiness,
experienced that, and it was
fear of
shocking.
love. Yeah. What was shocking? How did you experience it?
Fear
Fear
of
of what?
success was shocking. I didn't
What do you
know
mean?
that there was you were
Yeah.
capable of self-sabotaging
Yeah.
yourself to that
Yeah.
extent of not
Well, what do you
wanting
think
to.
what do you think that's about? What motivates that self-sabotage? Like,
I think
mean,
it's
it can be a
fear.
lot of things.
I believe it's fear of caring about what people think, fear of reaching somewhere, and you don't know
But
where
why?
that.
But why of success? Why would you be afraid of being successful and true to who you are, and maybe make a lot of money and have a lot of fame, or whatever success means to you? Why
Because
are we scared of success?
for the longest time, I felt I was stuck. And I didn't know why I was stuck until I had so many conversations with people that are way older than me and way more
Yeah.
experienced than I am, and started pointing out to me that it's as if you don't want to. It's like you're planning to reach there, but you don't want to reach there. I'm like, that's really odd. Like, I'm sure you don't know what you're talking about, by the way. So, a lot of meditations later and a lot of inner journeys later, I did realize that they're right. I had fear of success. I had fear of growing in general. And why I had that is because in my perception, fear and money meant power.
Mm. And so what? Power,
and
with
so-
great power comes great responsibility. You were afraid of that?
Yes.
Mm.
It comes with great
Oh my God,
responsibility.
that's interesting. I think I am also can relate to that, but a more simple reason of why I think I'm afraid of success is that this sounds so that I, like many people, don't feel like I deserve it. Not even the power. Yeah.
A lot of
Which
us
is a
feel like-
self-worth issue, and if I had a therapist, she'd tell you that's why it's probably best that I'm in quarantine and should be single. But hey, what can I say?
If you have a therapist saying that to you, then please.
I don't. But if I had a therapist in this moment, which I probably should, she would say that, or he would say that. Probably a she.
I think you have a wrong perception of what your therapist is going to say. She will not say that, I promise you.
You'd be surprised. You don't know what I would tell my therapist. No, but the universe has other plans, and I don't have a therapist. And yeah.
I think having a therapist is amazing.
I
That's for
agree.
one.
Yeah.
Jihad is asking us to elaborate more on that. Can you tell us what is that, so we can elaborate more on it?
How does Jihad?
هذا جهاد انت أؤمر. Ahmed, I just wanted wow, see, off the rails.
What happened? Yeah, it's okay. We're back. 2, 3, back.
All right.
We went like this. Now we've flown back though.
So I'm saying a fear of, okay, yeah, back to self-worth. I think many of us sabotage ourselves because we don't believe we are worthy of many things. And the question here is, who says you are worthy of
Society,
one?
your family.
Why do we
family.
get those fears to begin with?
Society, family, people who care about you but have their own ideas.
Perception of life.
Yeah, their own ideas about you know, how they perceive the purpose of life and what it means, you know. I mean, look, when it comes to self-worth, it's very interesting because there are people in my life who are very close to me who remind me, and I'm very grateful for them, even if it's difficult to hear, that I can be very self-absorbed, that I can also sometimes seem like I have a, like we think of a sense of self like overly confident, big ego, loud, always needs to be heard. And it's always funny because, sometimes the people who are the loudest or the strongest, to use, your hashtag, people who are louder aren't always stronger. And sometimes people who are quiet, whether they're inhaling or exhaling or whatever they're speaking softly, sometimes they have a deeper sense of, conviction and self-worth. I am someone who definitely has struggled with self-worth over a very long period of time. But on the flip side, I'm also someone who was felt it was important to be proud about certain aspects of my identity and who I am and my personality as well. So, we're all a little bit of this and a little bit of that.
In a limbo. Yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like I'm with you on that. I struggled a lot too with self-worth. And I hear a lot of stories about people suffering with that, and many of their stories are people who end up being very successful and pushing through, and being loud about their truth.
Yeah.
But it is a journey, and not a struggle, but it is
There-
a challenging journey for sure, to break down the barriers,
yeah.
and understand that you are the person who actually says if you're worth it or not.
Yeah.
It's a
I
perception.
think,
I believe it's a perception
I
coming from
think when,
childhood.
yeah, go
Sorry.
on, please. Sorry. No, I didn't mean to cut you.
I mean, I feel like it's a perception coming from childhood. Maybe you're going back to childhood, meeting your inner child. Um, he or
Yeah.
she
I mean,
hasn't been fed enough, and this is where
the,
you become, yeah.
yeah, I think, when there are periods in our childhood where in reality or perception, we felt like we weren't nurtured, or parts of ourselves in particular, for people who are struggling with sexuality, with religion, with a lot of the things that in all parts of the world tend to be very big cultural identifiers and important. I think we all those, like, if we could heal our inner children. I mean, that's why there's always this, like, stereotype of a therapist who, like, you can go and be like, I'm annoyed at this person at work because they're doing this and that, and you talk for like 20 minutes. They're like, tell me about your father, or tell me when you were younger, what was your earliest childhood memory of happiness? The reason they go there, look, I've struggled with therapy. You said I think therapy is really important. I'm a very analytical and overly critical thinker, and I'm not saying that like in a proud way. Like, it's actually a problem in the sense that I don't trust easily, especially I do in one aspect of my life, but like intellectually, I don't. So I'll always question them, and it's not always constructive conversation with me, although it's been a few years since I've tried. The reason I say this is because, to answer your question at the beginning about the inner child thing, is, and this is the true answer, I went to Peru a few years ago to film a documentary about ayahuasca. And long story short, in the process, I participated in this medicine that is, thousands of years old and ancient, has a lot of ancient wisdom, and also is being used in different ways all around the world. But the point is, that was going to be the aim of the documentary. And in that week-long trip to the Amazon, where I was forced to detach for logistical reasons from, digital technology, from all the things that were in my world back in New York that's mattered so much. And I lost myself in the stories of the people who I had met, who were at these retreats and losing themselves in the jungle, and the reasons behind them. Some of them were physical conditions and ailments. Some of them were mental conditions. All of them had mental health issues that they were trying to solve. And the point is, that was the first time I think I tapped into a part of my subconscious that was strong enough and open-minded enough and brave enough to really confront things that I had buried deep within myself. They're not specific memories. People are like, oh, what's the spill the tea, spill the tea. There's not necessarily a specific thing, like some sort of traumatic experience. It's just the culmination of things. And once I first had that courage to kind of confront that, my life began to, I started deconstructing kind of the patterns, and then able to start to be aware of them and then work towards changing them. So yeah, do I live my truth? Not yet, but almost.
You're getting there, basically. You're on the journey of it.
Let's hope so. Yeah.
I think it's a forever journey.
Like, yeah, she's like, he's so arrogant. He thinks he's gonna get there in this lifetime. Idiot. She doesn't speak like that, but in my head she does. She should. Very elegant.
That's a funny way of introducing us to your mom. So we were talking about healing. What kind of healing are you looking for in that journey?
Healing.
What kind of healing are you looking for?
Healing that is that gives me things I want and need to be happy, like humility and clarity and self-compassion and not confidence, but let's say conviction. I think we all, it sounds annoying to say, but I think I have hundreds of voices in my head. Sometimes they come out of my mouth, sometimes they don't all, but they're always in my head. And if I had to say, the majority of them, for some reason, are very negative. They're like that negative Nancy in all of our lives that we have, but different, kind of variations. And they tend to repeat themselves often, and they judge you, and they compare you to this person. They compare you to versions of yourself. Oh, these jeans don't fit. Oh, when I was a kid, I used to do all these things that I don't do. So I think on the flip side, there's another voice that is not often talking. It's not very loud. Maybe it's caught up kind of just inhaling and exhaling and being chill in your head or in your heart. And that voice is like often quiet, but it's if you can quiet the others, which I struggled with for more than a decade and still struggle with. But once you start to intentionally want to discover the more essential voice, once you have the courage and once you have the kind of the context of your life unfolds in such a way that you often from suffering or some sort of sudden realization, as you said earlier, once you get to that point and you start to listen to the quiet voice, you find, at least for me, I found that not only is the quiet voice calm and composed, but they're really like convincing. They're very coherent because it's a very simple voice, and
it has
a lot more
flowing.
Yeah, and it's a
completely
voice that is a conscious voice that is flowing in and out of yourself, in and out of other people, in and out of nature. And I know people are like, what happened to Ahmed? He went to the jungle, did ayahuasca, now he's sitting here flowing. But there was definitely a few periods of release, some prompted by exploring with substances, ways to unlock things in your brain and connect you to your subconscious. But those things, I want to be clear, like they're not for everyone, but more importantly, they're just like kind of like boosters, and they can propel you into a trajectory of reflection and, self-compassion.
Are we talking about ayahuasca?
Yeah, ayahuasca, mushrooms, iboga, all these psychedelic substances that are now all over the world being re-examined and re-studied as they once were in the 70s. And I really know from personal experience that there are a lot of things like mushrooms and psilocybin that are so much more effective than the $1 billion of pills that we're taking for mental health issues that are really, I don't think, serving us well.
Not that you're recommending it now for everyone, but it did work for you.
I'm not recommending it for everyone, but I think things that are found in nature in general, in our culture and our religion as well, are long honored, and they exist in other cultures as well.
I agree with you on that point.
Mm-hmm.
But I do believe, personally, to be honest, I do believe in medicine.
Yeah, me too.
Well. Yeah.
No, I don't. I didn't mean to I appreciate you saying that, because I didn't mean to suggest one is better than the other inherently, but I just, I guess I've had experience with both, and for whatever reason, for me, it was a more
Took you more into a
constructive.
realization journey where you were
Yeah,
able to untangle the thoughts in your head that were so loud and not
yeah.
quieting down. I
Or
believe,
see them all at the same time, not
yeah,
even untangle them, just to be able to see them and then be like, oh,
bird's eye
I need
view.
to take
Yeah,
stock. Yeah, macro perspective, universal perspective, rather than the individual perspective. A lot of us end up being trapped in our adult life in the former.
you're right.
Yeah.
Um, Jihad was asking back to like you don't
Oh yeah.
feeling like you don't deserve success. I think a more elaboration on that. I'm not sure. I feel like we did answer that though.
Yeah, I think in two sentences, just to clarify, jihad, when I say feeling like I don't deserve success, I'm referring to the part inside of us and inside me that even when I've had the most success, like moments in my life, um, those moments didn't feel as valuable in the absence of having a really deep connection to myself and confidence about who I am, and things like that. So it's just to say, I think we talked about it earlier, that sometimes you get so far in life, you have a lot of success, and I think it's called a little bit the imposter syndrome in some psychological textbooks. So you can Google it and look it up.
You said you experienced therapy.
Yeah, twice.
Why were you going to therapy, or what was the initial?
The the first time I was 18 or 19 years old, I was in Boston. I was in Boston University. My name was Ahmed. It was the year after 9/11. I had just moved from Austria, where I spent 3 years being bullied and discriminated against in a very extreme way because of the politics, the political nature of the country at the time. So I was really getting a lot of, and perceiving myself to feel a lot of things. And after 2 years going into school, all of a sudden I started having physical ailments that were crippling, like back pain. I couldn't get out of bed. I had no appetite. I lost 10 pounds, and I'm already quite skinny. Point is, I called an aunt, I called a few family members, some friends. They told me to go to the BU mental health clinic. I went in there, I shook the guy's hand because they had a service for students. Long story short, his name was Dor. He was Israeli. He put out his hand. He's like, "Hi, I'm Dor." And I was like, "Yeah, lahoui." Not that there's anything wrong with Israelis or Israeli therapists, but at that age, I was very much attached to my Palestinian origins and the kind of disenfranchisement. I was very attached to that identity, and just educating myself on it. And the point is, it was the best therapy I ever had in my life, because through two or three sessions, and reading a book called The Mind Body Connection by Dr. John Sarno. The book helped more than the therapy, but in tandem, that helped me move forward, even though I continued to suppress things about myself that meant I would have to go to therapy 5 years later again. Because I think we get to a breaking point. As much as we tell our friends, and as much as we tell ourselves and the people who we love in our lives, sometimes we lose track of the narrative altogether, because even with our friendships and those closest to us in our family, there are things that we say that we might not genuinely mean because we're trying to appear a certain way. So yeah, but therapy, I'm all for it. It's just, it hasn't worked super well for me in the traditional form. But like, I've had a shaman, who I call a shaman because that's what they do. They're a meditation instructor, and they became kind of a close friend and then a mentor, and they helped me develop my own meditation practice as well as like my sister. So it's like a
Yeah.
crowdsourced effort to keep me
So
sane.
your therapy
Like,
more was into a spiritual journey. That
yeah,
worked for you more than traditional walking into an office and saying, "Hi,
yeah,
how are you? I'm
yeah.
feeling one."
Yeah, and I think it's because I'm the kind of person who shares a lot anyway with my closest friends. And even though it's a different dynamic because they're your friends and they know you and they have stake in you, and maybe the therapist doesn't at the beginning, but I think all humans, once they get to know you, even if they're not supposed to, they have stake in you. So it's like, do we want to be real or do we want to be real? But no, yeah. So therapy hasn't worked for me super traditionally, but the spiritual stuff I think worked for me because one of my one of my struggles as a child in terms of my sense of belonging was that I often grew up in communities that were religious, whereas I wasn't. And I wasn't necessarily expected to be by my parents as much as other parents were. It was more of a cultural identity for me. And so I lacked sort of faith as a young person. And so for me, it wasn't surprising that like my path towards healing myself and parts of the trauma of childhood, if you will, which we all experience through relative measures. Part of healing myself was a spiritual path because it helped also to kind of nurture the side of me that was feeling like faithfully lacking, or like, struggling with my faith in life, faith in trusting, things, myself, people.
Would you say you have trust issues?
Yes, I also have daddy issues. I have mommy issues. I have sister issues. I have peer issues. I have issues in how I relate to everything. So yeah.
The fact that you're saying that on the surface, to me, is you are living your truth. And I really admire you because you are someone who does live their truth, especially as a Palestinian Arab man. There's a lot of things you talk about that most won't. And the fact that you're admitting about your mommy issues, your daddy issues, childhood traumas, trust issues, many of us are afraid, simply afraid to even say these words because, as you said, our ego won't allow us. And I feel like you saying that helps. This is what Louder is for. We're here to say, yes, we do have these issues and we're on a journey to bettering ourselves.
Yeah.
Not broken. We're just meeting ourselves. There's a lot of times people say,
oh, I've been broken, but yeah, I'm not broken now, but yeah, I've been broken recently.
I'm sorry for that.
It's okay. It's good. If you don't break, it was prompted by a heartbreak, but I broke my heart like more for myself than for someone else, which was the real heartbreak. I think when you betray yourself, even if that recognition comes through the process of betraying someone you're in love with, which is what happened to me. I betrayed myself. And then when you have to deal with the consequences of that, it can be too much to bear when you care so much about yourself and the other person.
Wait, but yeah. Have you betrayed the one you love, or the one you love betrayed you? And that made you feel...
I betrayed myself and my partner after having been betrayed myself. I have this rap song, which I can't believe I'm referring to because it's not a rap song and I'm not a rapper, but part of the journey and the process.
I've seen you play piano and sing.
Yeah, the piano's right there. My dad had he's like plotting ways to like get rid of it.
Tell us about the rap song.
Well, I was just thinking there's this line that's like, they say hurt people. I say hurt people's love's lethal. And when you skirt evil, you go back to fetal. Feel your soul cry like your adrenal glands on diesel. And that line is actually about that incident I was referring to, and then there's lines around it where it's like my lover, it just describes an incident that was very traumatic, which was what I was referring to when I realized like I need to heal my inner child or he might die. I don't want him to die. I don't want him to die.
Yeah, we don't want the inner child to die.
No. Oh my God, if he dies,
it's possible.
I know.
It's possible. And you can see the people who their inner child has actually died.
Yeah.
You feel there's a bit of sadness and less
Yeah.
soul in for life and excitement for life and
I think
positivity,
that I
etc.
think that I think that what I was telling you earlier about the conversation I was having with my friend here about why do we love being around kids so much? Like why when we're allowed, why am I when I'm around kids I lose sense of time, myself. It happens to me in the field. I'll be in Mongolia, I'll be in Puerto Rico, there'll be a hurricane, there'll be a this, there'll be a that as a reporter in the field. And then you naturally come across kids, and then kids like poke at you, they share things, they always want to interact. In Mongolia we went to some hut, they're like offering me milk, pulling on me, trying to throw their soccer ball at me. And my poor producer, like my producer, our team, the whole team was like getting distracted by the kids, but I was the one who needed to conduct the interview. And the point is, there's like 40 minutes of footage of me playing in the middle of this huge pasture with children, and like I end up like almost like running one of the kids over, and like
It's a
we're like,
reminder of stillness of life and happiness of
I,
life and simplicity.
I lost myself in that moment. I lost myself in the Syrian and Lebanese refugee camps in the border there. Oh my God, this is the perfect answer. You're really good at this. This is the perfect answer to your original question. It just took this long because I'm really
I
bad
told
at
you we
this.
will get there, and
Yeah,
it might
you're
take an
right.
hour and
So,
a half.
oh, I'm getting emotional. Um, I'm really getting emotional because I'm having a realization, not so sudden, but in the Philippines, when I did a story about children who are being abused by their parents, in Puerto Rico in the hurricane, in all the stories I've done, there is kind of a common thread and why, where when I'm around children, I lose myself in that sense of wonder and that, the quickness with which children are willing to forgive, and the kind of resilient nature of children. Like when that kid fell down, like in Mongolia, honestly, there's footage of this somewhere, but like I ran, and like literally, the kid ran into me, beelined, and hit the floor. Like, and I was like, and he bounced up, and my instinct was that I had met the kid 20 minutes earlier. I just picked the kid up, put him on my shoulder, like, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. And that connection that I had in that moment with that kid, reassuring him he was going to be okay, but also reassuring myself, like, oh my God, is insurance going to pay for this? Like, Um,
Yeah.
and those moments around children when I'm in the field, they're so um, priceless, and they really inform the way in which all those stories would turn out if it was completely up to me. But making them for big media companies, and also part of what prompted my recognition that I need to heal my inner child. Like, why is it when I'm around children do I drop everything, literally drop my job, and play with the kids? Like, I need to do some healing myself of my inner child. So, yeah, well done. I'm very
Wow.
impressed.
Thank you.
Not with myself, with your ability to unearth that, because I didn't know that was true.
I'm glad it's unearthing here on Exhale.
Me too.
I really am aligned with you. I feel like kids really remind us of the aspects we want to keep in ourselves, because life truly makes you forget these things. Just growing up and meeting different personalities and different kind of energies that you can swallow sometimes and become. Unfortunately.
Sada, I just read Sada say, haha, inner child insurance.
That was funny.
Legit though. Yeah, legit. No, you're right. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Yeah. You're right.
So yeah. Moving on. Hi Sada. Moving on. Where do you
wait, hold on. Let me see if I can. Did you send this? I don't know how to use Facebook anymore. Don't tell Facebook. I mean, they own all the platforms, so it doesn't matter. But no, I really don't know. I want to post this, but maybe I'll do it later. Let's just keep focused. See? Now I just want to play with my phone like all the kids.
All right, wait. Let's go back.
Okay.
Where does your mind find? Maybe you can say children, but another thing would be where do you find your complete and utter peace of mind and stillness?
Three answers. One, the beach. Waves, the sun, sand castles. So probably the beach, because it makes me feel connected to my inner child. Two, well, I have another I can't believe I'm referencing my songs. I'm such a loser. Um,
What
I
is it?
have another lyric in another song. It's like a poem that is opens. I was born in the West, kind of like the way I dress. A little suave, a little mess, but my soul is at ease in the East. Somehow find release where there is no peace. So I find release and peace. And like, what did you? What was the question? Where do you find?
Where is your complete and utter
Yeah,
mind at peace? Where
my
is it at?
yeah, my
Emo-
mind's at peace somehow when I'm in the Middle East, when I'm in Lebanon, and there's like a crisis unfolding, as there often is, as well as now. When I'm in Egypt and I'm covering a protest, when I'm even at a positive, like even a great cultural, like there is something about the fact that I grew up in Egypt for 10 years and my childhood was very much, majority was in Egypt and Kuwait and Jordan, traveling, seeing family. And then in the summers, we'd go to California. But the point is, I feel at peace when I'm in the Arab world, even though there's, in many ways, not a lot of peace beyond
That's
like
so beautiful.
borders. But it's the truth. It's the truth. And then the third answer, um, this is the cheesy one, but
Hit us. Hit us with the cheese.
like, where do I feel peace of mind? When I'm with someone sitting in silence, often in nature, and feel like I can just sit for like an hour or two or three or five or six, which I've done with that certain someone. It doesn't even have to be a lover. It can be your mother. It can be that person in your life where you can sit in silence. And usually that's a deep meditation point for me. And I just don't think. And so all those loud voices are quiet, and that's when I have peace of mind. So yeah, nature and people and the Middle East,
Amazing.
just
Um,
maybe where I am here in Kuwait.
yeah, I mean, you're enjoying Kuwait right now with family, and it's a
Well,
good
too
place to
much.
be at the moment.
Yeah, I'm very, very grateful to be here.
Alhamdulillah. What is your purpose?
Ooh, I wrote this down like 2 months ago after a conversation with my sister Luma, but I'm not going to read you that version because that would be like too easy, and then I wouldn't say the truth, and it might have evolved since then. So that's how much I know about my purpose. My purpose, I think, is rapidly, not rapidly. My purpose is consistently shifting, so it's not static. But I know that at its core, it's about. I've realized recently that it's about shifting my own perceptions and my own preconceived notions and my own kind of, my own perceptions about my reality and about reality and other people's realities, in order to better be able to then shift other people's perceptions, and particularly away from like um, frameworks and mindsets like us versus them, or that rely on othering, or that rely on like highlighting divisions or what makes us different rather than what we all share in common. And it sounds like uber noble, but it's really just a product of, I don't know. I mean, I am named after a prophet, but I'm not trying to have some sort of prophetic mission. Like, I say
Nothing's
that.
wrong with uber noble
No,
thing.
amen. That's what I'm learning. It's okay to be cheesy and noble and have morals.
Be cheesy,
Uh,
be extra noble, extra kind, extra whatever it
no,
is.
yeah, respect to you for saying that, because yeah, there's like a weird stigma around that, at least for certain people and
There's
circles.
stigma
And
around crying, around being kind,
yeah,
about vulnerability, about mental health. There's
yeah.
basically stigma around everything that's good for you.
I'll say something that I didn't plan or expect to say, but just popped in my head around stigma. Um, I think a lot of men struggle with intimacy. And it's not just men who struggle with physical intimacy with other women, it's men who struggle with intimacy in general. There are a lot of men who don't struggle, but I know in my experience, there are many more who do. And I think it's back to what you were saying. And I think it's important to mention this because, like, as a child, I didn't struggle with, like, it felt natural to hug my friend when he fell. It felt natural, whether it was a boy or a girl, it felt natural to do that. Like, when you see kids being cute and cheesy, we all like say, oh, because it like appeals to our instinct, right? It's instinctive to care. And for whatever reason, life gets in the way, society, culture, tradition, the way we're conditioned. And then it's like you get to a point in life where you're like, inside, I feel like doing this, but I can't do it for this and this reason. So, yeah, I think it's really important that we be aware of like be connected to our intuition, both
Yeah.
emotionally. Yeah,
And to live it as
emotionally.
loud as you can. And
Yeah,
hopefully it can ripple effect into others and understand that it's completely normal.
yeah. What is
Yeah.
normal? Nothing is normal. But yes, I know exactly what you
I mean, whatever normal is to society,
mean.
really.
Yeah.
um, a lot of times, I have two more questions, and then I want to move to questions from Isra, and then we can wrap it up.
Cool.
But before I ask you these two questions, I
Mm.
realized every time you're answering,
You
there's a
look up
lot
and
of
think.
no, that's amazing. There's a lot of care into, oh, what someone's gonna think, oh, what this is gonna think, and it's actually part of my question journey.
Yeah.
What do you do, or how do you deal with thinking about others? What do they think of you? Oh my, like what is Ahmed going through, etc., etc. And how do you deal with negative comments, especially that you're a journalist at AJ Plus? So
Yeah.
how do you deal with negative comments, and how do you try to deal with those constant thoughts of caring about what people think of you?
I think it all ties back to consistently working and trying to detach myself from my attachment to myself, to all the variations of myself. Ahmed the journalist, Ahmed the first son or your only son, Ahmed the Palestinian, Ahmed, the sensitive guy, Ahmed. There's so many. Um, it's like when you start to really question and take a moment to look at yourself, and I find that often the things that bother me about other people are things that bother me about myself. I find often that so much of my self-judgment comes from how I perceive others to judge me, whether they're really judging me or not. And so I guess for me, the journey to care less, I mean, I think once you have conviction and a sense of self-worth, it's like it's symbiotic to how much you have of that is how much you're gonna care what people think. And the way you get that is like, everyone just having understanding that there's different truths. I think as a journalist, I've been really fortunate to be exposed to so many different people and people in different political realities, social realities, people who have conflicting identities, and just seeing all that and seeing that as normal, as something that's consistent in my life, going from this place to that place. It's really made me feel like I'm always an outsider. It's really made me see how much I can relate to virtually anyone, even if they're rich or poor or black or religious or not, or this or, completely different background, completely different culture. There are points that we can connect to. And I think through that, like seeing someone who I otherwise might think is making a lot of poor decisions and hurting the world and hurting other people, but still being able to relate to them, somehow gives me an ability to not care so much what people think. The times that I care the most is when I fear, or when I feel or I notice that the people who I love, I'm hurting in one way or another, or I'm causing them anxiety. And that's where I think, unfortunately, a lot of us allow that fear to paralyze us and not let us speak louder and not be who we really want to be. And there's so many limitations and concerns that are really practical and pragmatic and can have real life consequences. I say this with so much privilege. One of the things that I've realized in this coronavirus time is just how much privilege I have. And, for a lot of my life, I focused on how I was part of different marginalized groups, which is true. And it was because I was made to be aware of those things, like based on where I was living and how people treated me and how I internalized the way that they treated me based on my name or my appearance or my religion or the way I acted. I'm too feminine. I'm too this. So yeah, I think, I don't know, that's a bit general, but that's how I do it.
Okay, fair enough. What are you celebrating?
I am celebrating the moment more than I ever have. I mean, really. And I'm learning to celebrate bad moments, which is like, how did I not know that through celebrating bad moments, you would be able to withstand them better? Someone should have told you that when you go through puberty. Um,
When you
no,
go through
but
puberty.
like, I don't know, at some age, you should just be told
There's a
that.
lot of things we should have been told, to be
No,
honest.
I mean, my
Many
mom
things.
told me, but I was just like, she also told me a lot of things that, But anywho, the point is, no, I mean, it's funny. You think back to, it's cheesy, but like, my mom used to say certain things like, "Mama, you are irresponsible." All these things she would say to me growing up, and I'd be like, and she, little things like appreciate the moment, da, 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 and I never did it. And now I'm like, how many years later, learning it all over again.
We never take it seriously because the way it's sent to us is
Yeah,
with that
yeah,
finger
confusing.
and like
Yeah, control.
with so
I
much.
also
Yeah.
I also struggled with, I told you earlier, I used to confuse love with attention. Maybe as problematically, I also didn't know that, like, what is love without control? And on a serious note, I think that that's something that in a lot of communities, that's بالذات بالعالم العربي, in the Arab world, in the Muslim
Traditional
world,
thing in the Arab world, 100%.
100%. And I was aware of it, but I wasn't fully aware of how it changed how I feel about love. So many of us are unable to accept love. And
Because it goes back to you thinking you're unworthy of it.
amen.
It's like you're
And
unworthy of success.
exactly. It's all comes down to a root of not being able to accept love, or even when it comes, even when your love is expressed towards you. Maybe, we have 5 love languages or whatever. So much of the last few years for me has been learning how to accept love from others, but also from myself. And yeah, I'm. So what was the question? What are you celebrating? I'm celebrating
You're celebrating the moment.
my growing, and my growing ability to accept love. I'll tell you, being in Kuwait has also been like a little bit of a master class of learning to accept love all over again, and in a context that's frighteningly familiar, but
From
also
family?
super. Yeah, from family and from, I would say, from people who are serving as mirrors of myself. Just to keep it vague and a bit
Yeah.
mysterious.
That's that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And finally, Ahmed, how do you wish to be remembered?
Oof. Hardest question last. She is really on it, this one. Remembered. You said I could take time.
All the time you need.
How do I want to be remembered? An inauthentic answer would be, I don't really care to be remembered. I just want to have had impact in this world. And I do want to have impact in this world. But I also think we all have egos and we want to be remembered. And I think the way I want to be remembered is fondly, like tenderly, like that I made people feel things. That I made people feel bad things maybe sometimes, like when I do documentaries, like what is the impact I hope to have? If people feel negative emotions, but that can somehow motivate them to change or shift or whatever, then I hope they remember that. And in the other way, I guess, about feelings, like I just want to be remembered as someone who made people question things and to feel things. I know that's very general, but like that's pretty much probably. I mean, I would also love to have like an island dedicated to me and like all my friends to be able to live there for the rest of their lives, since no one's going to be able to go back to work, since our very extractive economies and mindsets are limiting our ability to actually heal from this crisis. But I have faith and hope that we will be more regenerative in the future.
I hope so. I hope so. And that's a beautiful way to want to be remembered. I mean, having an
How do you want
impact
to be
on
remembered?
people. How do I want to be remembered? That's
Yeah.
the journalist in you mirroring the questions.
Yeah. I'm like, why am I answering the question? Yeah.
How do I want
No,
to
but
be remembered?
yeah, what's important to you about the way you are remembered? There's my edit.
I want to be remembered in a way that I was able to unearth, like you said today, things inside yourself. So maybe I won't be remembered on a big scale, but maybe I will be remembered from person to person, where
Yeah.
my conversations with you actually impacted you to unearth a few things inside of you that you did not know or were looping on, and finally were able to reach peace with it, or clarity, if not peace. I want to be remembered in those ways. That's on a small scale and personal scale.
Well, it's funny. Actually, I should stop saying that because it's never funny when I say it. You know what's interesting? So we just met, but the way I would remember you and this interview, for what it's worth, is like in all our interactions, it just seemed very like already happening. Like, not okay, this is happening, so it's gonna happen.
Naturally flowing.
Yeah, naturally flowing. We were in a flow, and then when we started, there was a technical issue, which is always the case, right? And the way we flowed through that flowed into the beginning of the first thing. And before you went live, we were talking logistics, and I wrote down what you were saying, which I think you could tell I was doing. But I do want to say it. You said to me about why we're doing this, or why you're doing louder after exhale. You said that you use your anxiety. You said, I use my anxiety and my pain, and I try to use it for the better. I started louder as soon as I started exhale. We can interview people who have the highest ranking in the world, the most following, and also just someone who's just starting out. And both will answer equivalent to the same deep question that will show you the unity of humanity. The questions are deep. You said they were personal, so I've been warned. And you also said that I could take my time to answer them. And right when you were saying all that, I stopped and thought to myself, as someone who spent like the last more than 10 years, asking questions for a living and doing interviews, I was like, wow, like, how did I never set up an interview like this? Because you made me feel like, I often say, and I just felt a connection with you in that moment, because I often start, like, I'll be like interviewing the president of Pakistan or whatever. And right before I'll be like, so I tend to go a little bit deep, and I like to get personal, but don't worry, we have all the time in the world. When in reality, the president of Pakistan doesn't have all the time in the world. He doesn't want me to go deep, and definitely doesn't think he's there to answer personal questions. But now maybe I should just have a different kind of show. Maybe that's
I
part
hope
of the
it
purpose.
inspires you to do that.
You do inspire me. That's why I wanted to read that with people, because I think it's cool when young people just do things authentically because they find their flow, and then here we are. So
I'm really glad we found our flow with you, Ahmed, really, and it is an honor to have you here, and thank you for being authentic and loud with your truth with us, and hopefully we'll have another one soon where we can get even louder.
it's been a privilege. And by the way, you in this interview made me feel like I should be louder. So maybe not this week or next month, but here's to getting louder. Thank you.
Yes, here's to getting louder.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ahmed. Wait, can we just answer Isra's question?
Oh, did she write one? Yeah.
It's really long, but we're gonna read it and hopefully give her.
Sure.
Sometimes I struggle to differentiate what my true self wants or needs versus what my traumatized or ego self needs. Like, wanting what you can't have happens to the best of us. Hope I'm not alone here. This makes it difficult to believe or trust yourself sometimes. It affects your confidence and willingness to take action. How would you approach yourself in those situations?
Great question, Esra. And I love that name, by the way. I think the way to do it is to quiet your mind. Start there, at least for me. Because when you say struggling to differentiate what my true self wants or needs, the first thing and you contrast it with what my traumatized or ego self needs, I mean, that to me indicates that you're aware of the distinction and that it exists. And so step one, check. Step two, right? And step two, quiet your mind, because when we do quiet our mind, as I was talking about earlier, I don't want to repeat myself, that quiet voice that gets lost by all the judgy voices and the voices comparing yourself, and you'll hear it, you'll feel it. and sometimes it happens at the same time. I had a nervous breakdown a few months ago, and I wasn't laughing when I had it. But at a meditation retreat, my sister Luma had bought for me a meditation retreat. That time, and she bought it 6 months in advance, and she was like, "You have to do it. You're not going to let me down." Even though it was like a beautiful, amazing gift to go upstate in New York. And anyway, the point is, I had just 4 or 5 months earlier had a real breakup and a real heartbreak and a real shift in my life. And anyway, the point is, when I broke down, it was what triggered the breakdown is that I finally made my mind quiet. And then realizations came to me about exactly what your question is, which is I didn't have to differentiate anymore because it was crystal clear to me in that moment, at least, and the next day, like what my needs are versus my wants. And I think one other thing, my sister often reminds me and our family, because she's works in this space of like mental healing and stuff. She often says, she has a company called Mind Bar, and part of what she always reminds me is in terms of communication with other people, how to talk from a place of needs. So I used to do it and be like, I need you to stop acting, stop doing this. And I realized that needs can't be about your behavior or someone else's behavior. It just needs to be like, I need to feel loved. I need to feel appreciated. I need to feel special. And once you start talking to yourself with I need rather than I want, even just that, even with yourself.
What's so different about that, Ahmed? What's different about saying to yourself, I need 1, 2, 3, or I want 1, 2, 3?
I think the biggest difference is, for me, when you talk about needs, you start to connect to, again, instincts and intuitive things that are essential for you to feel happy, for you to feel fulfilled, for you to be healthy. The human body is very complex and it's very intelligent, and the world is very dumb. That's how I like to say it. Like, not that the world's dumb, it's an easy way of saying, like, we complicate things, and but the human being, when you really pare it down, like, I think wants are often a distraction away from needs, and they serve to help us contain and compartmentalize the parts of ourselves that we want to contain and not confront, and we want to neglect. And we know we have, like, for me, very quickly, I know that I need to dance to be happy. I know that had I been a dancer, I would have probably been a lot more happy than a journalist. But I also know that I needed to do all these other things that prevented me from being that. And so it's like, it starts you off on a journey that's just more authentic to your
more true.
essential
It starts a true
more authentic
conversation, with yourself.
Yeah. Like, do I want to go out on Friday night?
Or
do I want to or do I feel like, do I need to go out on Friday night, or do I want to? And why do I want to? No, I only want to because I want people to think I'm cool. Well, why do I want people to think, or do I need people to think I'm cool? No, I don't need people to think I'm cool. I need to think I'm cool. Wait, why don't I think I'm cool?
And this, ladies and gentlemen, how anxiety starts.
Now that we've left you all with anxiety, I hope that answers your question.
I hope we can leave off now.
Yeah, we'll leave on that. Nadine, I'm just reading all the comments. Renine, by the way, بكل صراحة, really enjoyed this conversation. Like, I've done a handful of these. Done a handful of these.
By the way, Baha is like... Baha.
Yeah?
Yes,
she likes, Baha likes to dance. She's a dancer. Or he's a dancer. He's a dancer.
Baha is a guy that dances truly from his soul. And if you see that guy dancing, it will bring ease to your mind.
Yeah. Where is he dancing? Where can I see him dancing?
We'll do a live session for you. me بهاء.
حلو. أنا بطبل.
أنا بطبل. خلاص بهاء جهز حالك حبيبي. Ahmed, thank you so much. I'm not going to take more of your time. And we wish you all the best on your inner journey. And stay loud and true. And can't wait to have you back.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this. And hopefully we stay in touch. Don't be a stranger.
We definitely will.
Bye.